Hi everyone, my name is Noah and today I'm going to be talking about the collection Ephemeron by Fiona Benson. Reading through it, I think it can be best summarized, I guess, as a collection in fractals and life cycles. The collection is split into 4 parts, and those are insect love stories, boarding school tales, translations from the Pacify, and daughter mother. Insect Love Stories is a series of ecological poems, each one named after a different insect. Boarding School Tales can be, I guess, best described as like confessional poetry, and it follows one of the narrators, because there are several, their journey through like boarding school as an adolescent. The third section, Translations from the Pacify, is a retelling of the story of the Minotaur from the perspective of his mother. And it uses the story as an analogy for disability. So rather than literally being a Minotaur, the story has become an analogy. And the last section, Daughter Mother, is, I guess, coming back to that idea of confessional poetry and telling the story of a mother with 2 daughters, and that's set in the modern day. Yeah, so we have, I guess, like 4 very distinct and very like thematically very strong sections that work as, like each one works as its own mini section. You don't need to read them all together, but I think what they do is they complement each other quite well. They touch on very similar themes of, like womanhood and maternity and, I guess, like male hegemony and violence. And they work very well together to, I guess, tell you this almost like kind of meta-narrative. Those themes, I think, were particularly distinct in the Tales from the Pacify section. There was such a strong, I guess, like retelling or recentering is the word. The tone was, this happened, kind of just saying, the violence that occurred to women in the bluntest of terms. The real talk of violence and loss and grief, and all said like so matter-of-factly. There's a real, I guess, like survivalist to like the strength of women, and I guess the way that they've had to kind of also desensitize themselves, and it really kind of sets up what felt like a history. The narrators in Daughter Mother and Boarding School Tales, their actions were not in a vacuum. There's very much a sense that they are predicated on a history. And what was, I think, really interesting throughout the collection was this kind of layering of the semi-autobiographical parts of the collection. So we would go through insect love stories, and it would take you around the world, and you'd have this kind of really visceral imagery of like thoraxes and body parts and like very dehumanizing language. And then you would go to Boarding School Tales, and it would, I think, really ground it back into modern day. So overall, I would have to say this is probably one of my favourite collections that I've read in a really long time. The use of imagery throughout is so unique and varied and rich, and there's a real sense of like different kinds of poetry and a real range of that. There's more prosy poems, especially throughout the first part of the collection, and then you have very different use of forms. There are shape poems throughout, a much more poetic language use in some parts, and there's also kind of really interesting language in the translations from the Pacify section, which kind of use the language of translation, and like I said before, that it comes across very like matter of fact, and there's a real, I think, power to that, which is really interesting. What I will say is quite a dense collection, and it's not like a sit down in one session and read kind of vibe. I think everyone will find something that resonates deeply with them because it touches on such universal themes, and it also tells them in such different ways.